Good morning, everybody. You can take your seats. We're going to call the meeting to order here. And we're going to start off with open forum. Do we have anybody who's here for open forum? I don't have any sheets, but if you are wanting to speak for open forum, go ahead and raise your hand or jump up with excitement.
I also have Ellen Tom. I also have Elizabeth Tellison online who would like to speak.
For open forum?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, yep.
All right. Well, we do have one person online hoping to speak to open forum. So why don't we let her go? And that's Elizabeth Tellison. Tell us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. With the EIS coming out, I'm sure everybody, or the county's EIS, I suppose everyone is looking at that. Particularly of note is the county's decision to pull all of the urban growth areas in the rural zoning still. A little different than what I had perceived coming into this process, but nonetheless, that is what the DEIS is showing. Particular to the city of Cheney, that accounts for quite a bit of their growth area. I've been in touch with Scott about this. I don't know if Mayor Martin is around today or if Mr. Morning is in attendance, but either of them may want to kind of chat on this issue, make sure that we aren't going to end up with a pretty dramatic shortage on available land at Cheney and a disconnect between what the county is advancing for its plan and what the city as of now is advancing for its plan. So just putting that on the radar, and that's all I've got today. Thank you so much.
Elizabeth, is there anybody else with a hand raised for open forum?
No.
Okay, open forum going once, going twice, 3 times. All right, we will move along. Scott, would you like to introduce the items coming up?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. The first item on the steering committee's agenda is a public hearing for the HAPT allocation issue that we've been studying for more than a year. Let me go through, since the steering committee hasn't had a public hearing in some time, let me go through some of the ground rules on that. This hearing has been noticed consistent with RCW 3678.035 and the county's public participation program guidelines. The purpose of today's hearing is to receive public comment and SCEO deliberation on the HAPT input question, whether to use population share or housing share for the 26 to 46 planning period. All documents provided to the steering committee, including staff reports, technical analyses, and correspondence, have been posted in advance consistent with the guidelines. Any comments received today will be included in the administrative record transmitted to the Board of County Commissioners afterwards. So let's jump in.
Let me get over there. There you go.
There we go. This is the real basic part of the housing allocations. Many of you have seen this slide before. We most recently briefed our County Board of Commissioners with this. It was a housing for all planning tool created by Commerce. The methodology was adopted by the board in January of 25. The original population share input was known at the time. The housing share input came along shortly thereafter at the request of Commerce to use that. And then the housing didn't reach a full consensus of the group, but it's been used by most, if not all, of the planning jurisdictions going forward for their planning work in 25 and 26. So, and these were in the online link if you saw it. But generally speaking, this is the population share input, and the chief differences or the issues relate to the unincorporated county as well as the cities and how all of those allocations are done by income band. It does not, and the top line numbers and excuse me, Commerce is here to clarify this. There was a letter from Commerce in your packets that talks about the county's responsibility is to that top line number. And that means the income bands as well as the housing allocations. How they are distributed to the jurisdictions is up to really the steering committee making a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. So this first one on the population share input shows about 23,000 in going to the urbanized unincorporated county. Next biggest categories are about 17.5 to the city of Spokane and about 15.7 to the city of Spokane Valley. Then there was a move to the housing share input. And this is the one that has been used by most of our constituent jurisdictions. Notably, it shifts numbers from the unincorporated UGA into the cities in some way that was based on a 60-30-10, at least formula that we were informed of that tried to account for a current lack of housing in those cities, as well as a homelessness combination or calculation to add to that. And then those allocations were made based on a persons per household calculation that is done for each of the communities. The next one, and what I want to show you on this next one is the difference, because in the housing allocation, the unincorporated county has 17 and about 6,200 allocated to its rural portions. And that went up substantially from the first allocation, which was one of the challenges, certainly of GMA, and also one of the confusing parts of the tool for a lot of us was, how does a tool that's supposed to be promoting urban growth increase the allocation to the rural areas? In talking with Commerce and other planners, there was an agreement that the county has the flexibility to shift those numbers to more accurately reflect both the patterns of rural development, but also the encouragement of creating urban development and not encouraging increased rural development on large lots. That then moved the county's allocation to 20,000 in the urban growth areas and about 3,000 in the rural areas. Those were the only numbers that changed in this third version. The housing allocations to all of the other jurisdictions remained as is. And so this is the net result of the first and the third chart that we showed you. And the second and the third were identical except for that county shift from rural to urban. So generally speaking, the unincorporated UGA dropped in allocation by about 2,600 units. Airway Heights would have dropped by about 1,000, Liberty Lake by 1,400, and then the two bigger cities went up by 4,800 and almost 1,000. Those are the allocation differences between the two pieces using population share versus housing share. All right, and so with that, I will stop. We can take deliberations. PTAC had some comments I believe we were going to make, and you've received letters from Airway Heights, most recently the city of Spokane Valley this morning. Jim Frank submitted some comments late yesterday. I'm sorry, that's on a different issue. Sorry, Jim. But I think we're leaving it to you to hear your comments and deliberations on this issue.
So should we start with PTAC? They've got a report.
When you read my mind, I'm like, oh, I received a letter from the city of Spokane Valley. Thank you.
So is there somebody from PTAC who wants to give a report?
I'm Steve Roberge. I'm here representing PTAC. I'm the vice chair for that committee. So I just want to start off by announcing that all jurisdictions are working to complete our compliant as an update. PTAC would like to reiterate its support as expressed in April 20th and supporting the housing allocation based on the A-prime methodology utilizing it. We also support the county's authority to balance and adjust allocations in rural and county urban growth areas.
The speaker needs to get closer to the mic.
Steve, why don't you come up here, if you would, please. And then, as a reminder, because the room is large, anybody that wishes to speak will ask you to come up to the podium and better record your voice.
Is this better? Can you hear me better?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. So we support working to complete a compliant comp plan as per rec update. We'd like to reiterate our support for the April 20th memo that PTAC provided to the steering committee. We think this housing allocation clarification is both procedurally and technically vital, so that there is no confusion now or in the future. Leaving it unresolved or moving in a different direction creates risk, both creating potential capacity imbalances, creating a circular planning cycle, and statutory vulnerability. Creates capacity imbalances, possibly by deviating from the housing share, which forces adjustments from jurisdictions and from those that currently lack infrastructure or space to support them. It creates a circular planning process. The jurisdictions forced into these adjustments who are inevitably have to undergo costly processes, moving them back to the housing share baseline. It also creates statutory vulnerability. With the GMA deadline ahead of us, this exposes our collective comprehensive plans potentially to appeal, delays, and additional potential liability. PTAC urges the steering committee of elected officials to recommend housing allocations based on the A-prime methodology using the housing share inputs.
Steve.
Aligning with the established method will help to avoid unnecessary costs, potential liability, and delays, ensuring compliance with statutory deadlines and reasonable.
Steve, your voice is fading in and out on the mic. Oh, you're done.
I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you.
And then Elizabeth Tellison's hand is up again.
okay, well, we'll get to her in a second.
Yep.
I've got folks here,
No
so
problem.
why don't we start with Jim Frank, and then we'll go to Dana Leroy.
You
I
just
see the
speak.
microphone.
You don't need to. Just speak
Just-
loudly
okay.
enough for the. Nope, that's okay.
My name is Jim Frank. I'm with Greenstone Corporation. I've been working with Habitat and other nonprofit housing providers on this issue for almost 2 years. So I appreciate the opportunity to address you on this. I think we feel a bit vindicated. There's a letter in your packet from Commerce, and Commerce says in that letter that the process that you used, that PTAC was recommending, was flawed. That recommendation by PTAC for what they called housing share was never approved formally by the CTAC or the Board of County Commissioners. So you're here now to try to accomplish that. But the process that PTAC used to create housing share was equally flawed. That process, Commerce does not have a definition for housing share. Commerce does not have a process of determining housing share. Commerce does not. Commerce told me that the HAP tool cannot be used to calculate housing share. So what happened here is that PTAC developed their own spreadsheet to calculate housing share. They basically made up a formula that they felt represented housing share. And when they did that, they used data from pre-GMA housing development. So they used pre-GMA data as the base for calculating what they called housing share. And the adjustment they made for family size and homelessness or those other issues were all based on, significantly based on pre-GMA housing share. So that's why you see the deviations, the significant deviations that you do. You see a big increase in allocation to rural Spokane County. That happened because, and this number surprised me, in 2020, if you look at the 2020 population data, you'll see that rural Spokane County accounted for 20% of all the population in Spokane County, 20% in the rural area outside of the growth management boundary. And so when you use that historic data, you over allocate to the city of Spokane, you over allocate to rural areas, and you under allocate to Airway Heights, Liberty Lake, and Spokane County inside the urban growth boundary. So that's what happened. And that is a formula that was made up by PTAC. It wasn't required by Commerce. And so you have all of these anomalies now. And so it's my recommendation that you stick with a housing allocation that's based on the population allocation that we've calculated, and that population allocation is based on the growth projections from 2020 to 2023. That was the period of time that that population forecast was based on, and not go to pre-GMA data, pre-GMA population data to create a housing allocation that is significantly flawed. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Deanna?
Good morning. My name is Daniel Leroy. I'm the Director of Government Affairs with Habitat for Humanity Spokane. We are an affordable home ownership developer, so we develop usually middle housing ownership products for the 80 to 50 AMI income band that you may be familiar with in this planning process. And to that end, when it comes to this process, we want to make sure that the outcome of this housing allocation process results in sort of the most sort of pro affordable housing development outcome possible. And that includes sort of well-trod topics of moving the housing from the rural county back into the incorporated county, so that there's land that is infrastructure supported, but also means as we are looking at sort of at housing allocation shares, that those housing allocations are going to places that realistically can develop ownership ready middle housing for families 80 to 50% AMI. So as this is being discussed, please keep that in mind. This really is a foundation that helps us advocate with local jurisdictions after the fact to update their zoning codes, their regulations, to push for more ownership friendly middle housing that is appropriate for 80 to 50% AMI. And so this is a very key process to sort of undergird the advocacy that we do regionally. So as this discussion is happening, please keep sort of the ability to develop middle housing at specific incomes sort of as a priority, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll go to Elizabeth online.
Yeah.
And if anybody else wants to speak to this, please just fill out one of these sheets and bring it up.
She needs to unmute herself.
Can you unmute, Elizabeth?
Yes. Is that better?
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you. Again, echoing the thanks for finally kind of slowing down, taking a look at this, doing the work that needs to be done to accommodate the change that PTAC drove for the housing share input. I'm still a little concerned about the attention given to rural Spokane County. While dropping a bunch of units out of that expectation, I think is wise and consistent with what would have been the population allocation. It also presumes that there will be no 50 to 120 housing going into our rural zones. It seems to me in the lead up to this and the adoption of the population allocation that the county and the SCEO had addressed that there would be some modest and middle income housing in the rural areas, and that coming off wholesale seems a little bit short-sighted on what the true expectations are for building in rural Spokane County. In comparing with the DEIS, while it seems like the DEIS may have been modified to pick up this change in the rural allocation, it doesn't seem to really talk to why at one point we were able to accommodate housing at some of the middle income levels that we can't now. So that I think warrants some additional attention either from staff, from the SCEO, or at least the commissioners to evaluate and ensure that we are doing what we can to accommodate these middle income housing brackets and not, forcing them all into an urban center where the accommodating expectation may be apartments and not homeownership. So just highlighting that point again, appreciate you guys taking the time to put this to hearing. I echo Jim's thoughts. I think the population allocation as originally vetted and adopted is a better reflection of what we should expect over the coming years. But in any event, here we are talking about it. So I ask you guys to give it careful thought and consideration. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much. Scott wants to make a quick comment and then we'll go to Greg Pig.
Elizabeth brings up a point on the allocations and how they might have changed from those middle income bands. Remember, those are allocations. That is, there is no prohibition against middle housing being built in these areas. This is simply that reflecting that allocating those to those areas seemed imprudent because the provision of services, transit, and other things are not very widely available in our rural areas. But these are only allocations. They are not zoning. They are not prohibitions against housing going in any of these areas. And that's an important distinction as you consider this. We're making allocations for planning purposes, but the market acts in its own way. And so I want to be clear that we're not saying by putting those zeros in those allocations that middle housing is prohibited in those areas, only that we're not allocating it there.
Okay, Greg Fig. And unless we get more, this is our last speaker, or if you're online, raise your hand. One more here. You.
Good morning, all. Greg Fig, Washington State DOT. Just here to talk for a moment about the reallocation from the rural area, which to the unincorporated UGA, which we support as an agency, as it will help lower vehicle miles traveled and will reduce impacts to our rural highways and rural intersections. So we support that. Our concern is when we looked at the data that was presented by the county, the rural areas, unless there's a policy to prevent like certificate of exemptions or other things from happening, the last 4 years of data would show kind of record numbers of building permits in the rural areas. So to simply reallocate without a policy to ensure that happens is, likely will not occur. And in talking with the county, they have indicated that yes, that a policy change would be needed to ensure the reallocation that's projected here does occur. So our thought is that while we encourage it, just to project a number without a policy change to ensure its occurrence likely will not happen. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much. Let's see, we've got Melissa.
Hi, good morning, committee members. I'm Melissa Olofaituli. I'm the Commerce Representative for Spokane County and a couple other counties in this region, and the senior planner assigned to work with all of the planners in the region and provide technical assistance and support. So thank you for hearing my comments today. I did want to clarify, Commerce did submit a letter to the steering committee and to the Board of County Commissioners dated April 20th. Scott, I think I sent that to you again yesterday, so I didn't see it posted online, but hopefully we can get that distributed. The letter does clarify that Commerce has been consulted throughout this process by members of the PTAC and kind of worked through some of the issues related to the change from population share to housing share. And we are supportive of the work that, kind of the allocation process and the steps that were taken. We work again, consulted throughout the process, myself and our housing and data manager, Laura Hodgson, who's kind of the expert in the HAPT tool. So I do want to just emphasize a couple of points from the perspective of commerce in the state. Scott is correct that the most important thing that we'll be looking for is to ensure that collectively the allocations meet those top level or county-wide housing requirements by income level. So as long as collectively, between the county and all the jurisdictions, there's sufficient capacity. That's one thing we'll be looking for, but also that everybody's kind of in agreement and working from the same set of numbers. And to that point, the A prime using housing share as the input, as the PTAC vice chair mentioned, Steve, most, if not all of the jurisdictions are using those numbers. And we believe that at this point in the process, it's quite late to change that. And it could put each jurisdiction in a vulnerable position in terms of statutory requirements and the deadline that's fast approaching. So we would caution you to think about that. And we are available for questions if any come up during this. So thank you again.
Okay, and then Spencer Gardner.
Good morning, Spencer Gardner. I'm director for the city of Spokane. I wanted to address a couple of things that have come up during the testimony today. So first, I want to make sure it's really clear. There's no dispute on the part of the city. And I guess I can't speak formally for PTAC, but in my experience with PTAC, also no dispute that the county does have the authority to determine how to allocate the housing units across the various jurisdictions. So concerns about supposed flaws in the process for the allocation of those units, I think are a red herring. Our concerns at this point are really about process. So the key facts are, first, that the A prime methodology has been identified as the preferred methodology. That was properly referenced and adopted in the resolution. The second is that the housing inputs have been consistently referred to as or used for producing those numbers, starting in, it was first discussed in November 2024. That was midstream through the process of selecting those numbers and prior to the January resolution that was adopted. So first came up in November 2024. The adoption of the resolution occurred in January at the Board of County Commissioners. And then in January 2025, there was subsequent discussion about the housing inputs at the SCEO. So the SCEO has been informed about the population versus housing input issue throughout the process. If you look through the record, and I've reviewed those videos, it was stated to the SCEO that no subsequent action was needed to formally adopt the housing share inputs. That was stated to the SCEO, and as staff, when this issue was sort of coming up, to the extent there were concerns expressed about a need to formally recognize the numbers or anything like that, the understanding given to us was that there was no need for any kind of official action. Again, if you look through the record, and I reviewed all these videos, staff, the SCEO was told that, or it was reiterated that the adoption was for a methodology and that those numbers were subject to change. That was a consistent theme in the presentations to the SCEO. You're adopting a methodology, the numbers are subject to change.
was said multiple times in those meetings. So at this point, again, the concerns are really about the process. And from the staff side, a change from the housing inputs, which have been used by virtually all the jurisdictions doing the planning around the county, to the population inputs at this late date represents a significant change in what has been done to this point, the planning work that has been done by the jurisdictions, including the county itself, and what has been presented to the general public in all of the planning work that's been going on around comprehensive plans. And we feel would contradict all of the work and all of that public information that has been put out. So our concerns are about the process. We could argue about whether the numbers were allocated properly or whether there's some kind of error in a formula somewhere. But at the end of the day, that is not really the issue here. The issue here is about process. That's all.
Okay, is there anybody else online?
No.
Anybody here? I would just ask a question and maybe Scott, you can answer. If at the end of the day, the goal is just the top line numbers, everything needs to add up to equal those top line numbers, then could we literally just sit here and start making motions that allocate this many to here and this many to there based on nothing but our own opinion?
Technically, and I don't want to act as an attorney, I would think you could do that. I think that would dismiss, a year and a half or 2 years worth of work from your own professional staff. But the steering committee has the ability to make any recommendation it wants to the Board of County Commissioners, or if there's no consensus, to not make a recommendation.
I guess I'm just a little challenged by the idea that all of this time and effort and work has gone into this, not just by us, but the state and commerce. And at the end of the day, we can just do whatever we want. It seems a little odd to me that that's actually the case.
Maybe Steve might want to speak for PTAC, but from, I think a general perspective, the HAPT tool is brand new. It was introduced because the legislature introduced into the GMA the idea of not just providing for affordable housing, which was in a very simple line in our comprehensive plans prior to this, but by income bands. They had to look at allocating housing by the income bands based on area median income. That was a newer concept from the legislature. Commerce, to their immense credit, created a tool that all counties and cities could use to try to get our arms around what that means. And so, it's a new process. And so knowing that, we all adopted the idea that here's the tool we're going to use. We started with population, it shifted to housing, but also recognize that it's an imperfect tool because it's never been tried before. And so the idea was, and that's why even Spencer mentioned, here are the numbers, they're subject to change. PTAC had talked repeatedly about a first allocation, then we go back and look at our housing, or look at our land capacities, adjust if needed, and then the housing tool sort of took the place of that. So it's a whole new thing for all of us to do that.
Well, obviously we've got a couple options in front of us, recommendation one way or the other, or make no recommendation. So I don't know if anybody has a thought or comments, a motion. Commissioner French?
So I think you technically have to close the hearing.
Do we need to close the hearing?
Yeah.
So nobody else, correct? Just make sure.
Correct.
All right, so do I need a motion to close the hearing? No, okay, well, I'll officially close the hearing and then we can move on to action by the board. Did you have, was there a further comment or?
Yeah, I did, if you don't mind, Chair. Just, because of the do I need to get up there? Can I speak loud enough for everybody to hear me?
Can folks online hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Thank you.
So, I think during this process, I've been challenged by a couple different things. One, and I'll start out with this, the role that PTAC plays in this process gets real gray when they move from technical advisory, which is what their job is supposed to be in the interlocal agreement, and start to dive into policymaking. And then that creates challenges for this board as we're looking at recommendations. Are they technical in nature or are they policy in nature? And I've been growingly frustrated with the fact that it's becoming more policy and less technical. Setting that aside, I'm because there is still some discussion, debate about whether it's housing or population. And this is ultimately going to be a decision that the Board of County Commissioners is going to make. I'm wondering if, and I'll make a motion to this effect, that we just send this item on to the Board of County Commissioners with no recommendation. And then let the board make a decision, which is ultimately their responsibility anyway, but at least that might limit the amount of hand wringing that we have to do here. And I'm trying to wrestle down to a recommendation that might or might not be supported by the board. Just send it to the board and let them figure it out. That's my motion.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there anybody who would like to speak to the motion? Councilmember Klitzky.
I oppose the motion for multiple reasons. First of all, this body exists for reasons to represent the jurisdictions within the county and all of the work that we've been doing.
I'm sorry, Kitty, would you mind coming up? You have such a soft voice.
Yeah.
Wow.
What do you say?
Thank you.
So I oppose the motion for several reasons. First of all, this group exists to carry forward the work that our jurisdictions have been doing and to represent our jurisdictions and our policy positions. I do not think that PTAC, our staffs, have been weighing in as policy discussions. We had our policy discussions back in November and early 2025. We've been talking about this for a long time. And we set the direction when we decided about Prime A. And all the jurisdictions have been using Prime A. We have directed our staffs to use Prime A, but they are the ones going into the HAP tool and using the HAP tool. They're the ones crunching the numbers. They're the ones seeing the trends. It's their duty to talk to us about what they're experiencing and how it's working. And for our part at the city of Spokane, our staff person has done that. The staff person that's working with the HAP tool, Kevin, who you've heard about or heard from multiple times at these meetings, has pointed out that the instructions on the Commerce website, which we all had access to, there's tons of instructional videos and different things to tell you how the HAP tool works on the Commerce website. It's been up for what, 2 years, year and a half? And they all say to put in your housing allocation. And we've always figured out our housing allocation when we do these things. This is true, Jim. Like, that's what we used to do before we even had the HAP tool. So we're continuing to do what we've always done. And staff is using the numbers that we have always used competently inside the tool. Those allocation trends that Mr. Frank is having trouble with, they're different than the OFM trend. We're not using the same numbers and the same benchmark as the OFM trend, which does get corrected by OFM. We're using trend lines that we can see in our own census. The last thing I want to say about this is if we go and we take away the housing allocation and we use a population share, which is not what the HAP tool was designed to do, we're going to mess up VMT pretty badly for the jurisdictions that are in the center ring. So we will need to, as a county, address an increased VMT if we intend to put density into those other jurisdictions. When we use the population share, that's what ends up happening. So we're going to have to figure out a way to address that. But most jurisdictions are pretty much done with this. We've spent the money, we've spent the hours, we've done the work. And now we're going back and second guessing it because a couple of folks don't understand the methodology and a couple of folks that didn't like the results. If we want to fix results, because yes, like I agree with putting more population share inside the county. I also agree with Mr. Fig, though, that we're going to need a policy to make that happen. We can't just allocate it differently. But in addition to that, I think that if we're saying, oh, Cheney does need capacity or whatnot, we still have the legal ability to swap GMAs into places where it makes sense, or not GMAs, UGAs into places where it makes sense. That's still legally available to us. It's always been allowed, even under the settlement agreement, which I was a party to that settlement. So I think we should stay the course. I think we should recommend the housing share. The jurisdictions sitting at the table have already used it, and our voice needs to be heard. Even if it is up to the county commissioners, I would like it on record that this group used the housing share and supports using the housing share.
Okay, thank you, council member. And we've got Mayor Cooper with a hand up.
Yes. Thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm going to I'm opposed to the idea of not having a recommendation, because the whole purpose of the SCEO, along with the whole purpose of why, we have the PTAC and we have all this advisory and we've gotten to where we are today, and spent a lot of time together, for a long period of time now working on this together. So I think it sends a bad message that this group cannot come with a recommendation. And so that's what we were tasked to do, is the oversight and to shepherd this through and to go forward with a recommendation. And at the end of the day, the county will make the decision they're going to make. But, Prime A is what was adopted, going back and fixing the error that happened along the way and getting back to Prime A, which most of the jurisdictions have used and are ready to submit on that. So anyway, just for that reason only is that we were tasked, we were given this duty, and we should be able to come up with a recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, other. Well,
City of Fairway Heights supports a collaborative GMA compliant approach that respects local conditions and the work that we've already completed on 26 comprehensive plan. We would be against this motion for similar reasons to Mayor Cooper, what was just mentioned. We have 3 items on the agenda that are in front of us to address this morning. This is one. And, I think that this body needs to make a formal recommendation for those very purposes. So this body has a job to do, we need to do it. And Fairway Heights, I hope everybody had a chance to read our letter, that we submitted, but we reaffirm our April 13th recommendation to adopt the housing share as an input of using a prime methodology. We fully support the steering committee of elected officials recommending adoption of the HAP table with housing share input, including Spokane County proposed rural 2 UGA reallocations for the county's housing share. Our allocation of 3,955 housing units is consistent with our ongoing 2026 periodic update work. There are no changes that we are asking. So our recommendation, and then even beyond that, the Washington State Department of Commerce has confirmed in writing that HAP inputs are a local decision, so long as Spokane County meets its countywide top line allocations by income band. So it would be my recommendation to not approve this motion, but for us as a body to adopt the HAP with the housing share input. And rural 2 UGA allocations for Airway Heights having 2,955 units.
Not to repeat everything that's been said by the previous speakers, but I agree completely. This is on behalf of the Spokane Valley. I'm just going to mention a few things from the letter that was sent out. Deviating from the housing share input at this stage, introducing severe risks that result in additional costs, time, resources, and potential liability for jurisdictions in Spokane County. Formally adopting the housing share baseline as the most efficient path forward, given our strict statutory deadlines. This clarification is in the public interest, provides predictability for the business community, and fulfills GMA mandates. The city of Spokane Valley strongly recommends that the adoption of any resolution formulating allocations based on a prime methodology for housing security.
Other comments? Commissioner.
I'm going to speak against the motion because I think the county commissioners should hear what the other jurisdictions' recommendation is to. It's ultimately the Board of County Commissioners' decision, but I would like to get a formal recommendation from this body.
I would ask the question, I'm just wondering, I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of the process of which option we choose, what are the odds, and not a better way to put it, but what are the odds that we're actually getting this right in this way? I mean, I've heard from folks who talk about Liberty Lake and how much growth anticipation there is. Do we really believe that the numbers, and I'm not suggesting we change these numbers per se, but I'm just asking the question, you know, from a market, from a data-driven perspective, are we potentially setting ourselves up to be challenged by growth in certain areas? If you over allocate to one area that may not be as desirable as a other area and you've under allocated there, are we going to see impacts across the county over time? And so my question, I guess broadly, is, do we think we truly have this right? If we're going to make changes, when would be the last possible moment we could make those changes? And if we don't make changes this year, what would be the next point in time that this could be reconsidered? Scott, you know the answer to that, or?
Thank you. I don't necessarily have an answer, but I would again remind the committee, these are allocations. The market doesn't react to this. You know, Joel's constituents are looking for products they can sell to people that want to buy, and that product is going to be something that they want. Could be a single family house, could be a townhome, could be a condominium. So, you know, the market will adjust its own way. There's no prohibition to say, well, we hit our allocation, we can't accept any more building permits. So there's no ceiling on these for any jurisdiction. That said, the planning that goes into these numbers is important for our other agencies, for DOT particularly, for water and sewer agencies, for schools. They're looking at especially on the edges, is this area going to grow by 1,000 people, or is it not going to grow at all? Does that affect school district boundaries, the planning district serving? So the allocations serve a legitimate planning purpose, but the market has its own mind.
But a lot of this is based on what your comprehensive plan and your zoning and your land use designations are. And so if you are basing it on a number that's under or over, then you might be trying to push growth in areas where it doesn't, the market isn't necessarily wanting to push it, or vice versa. So that's why I'm asking the question. I mean, I understand the suggestion that we're too far along, we got to stay the course, but at the end of the day, I also want to get it right. And so I'm just trying to understand, do we actually think we got this right, and that we're not going to see pressures because of how we planned around this across the county?
For everybody, this is a year and a half of work. We have, and our planning department brought this up to us. We've had so many meetings about what is realistic for everybody. We have a ton of constraints out there. We have J-list, South Highway 2. We have density restrictions. There's so much that we have going against us. We believe that these aggregate numbers are true and accurate for what we can plan for. That's the only thing that the city of Fairway Heights is asking for, is we think that these are realistic for us. And I think at the end of the day, that's what this part is asking is what's the realistic numbers for the municipalities.
Councilwoman Pliski, and then
The jurisdictions can speak for themselves on what they think is best for their population allocation, but this is also the best work we have, the best tool we can use right now, and we've already put a ton of time into thinking about this question. So obviously, what the jurisdictions have put in is the best guess. But this isn't meant to be a crystal ball. This is a planning tool. Try to figure out how we meet our income band allocations, how we meet our VMTs, and how we meet our other goals as communities. We have a 5-year check-in where we can adjust, this is a 20-year plan. So, yes, we could, possibly be planning for infrastructure that isn't needed, I guess, if we over allocated a jurisdiction and they made a major investment, but they're doing their work, and I feel like that's unlikely in terms of what we can predict, right? Like, we can't predict any foreseeable cataclysm that would prevent but this is the best guess.
Yeah, Commissioner French and then Commissioner Kern.
Yeah, I just want to provide some additional clarity. I'm not, motion is not to change what Airway Heights has done. In fact, from my standpoint, I fully support what you've done, as well as Medical Lake and as well as Spokane Valley. And so the challenge is that if anything changes that would help influence these numbers between now and when the board takes an action, we now have to deal with a recommendation that might not be consistent with what we need to do to protect the county and achieving our goal with regard to adopting a comp plan. So I'm not advocating to change what the recommendations are for that, many of the jurisdictions have already been through the planning process for. You already know what your number is. God bless you. I'll support that. What I don't want to do is get caught with the board having to make a decision or make an adjustment predominantly with the county's numbers that would then fall in conflict with the recommendation. Ultimately, the board is going to make the recommendation. This is the final decision. This is just a recommendation. So you want to put us at risk of having to come back or have the board take an action that's not consistent, especially it relates with the county's numbers, not the Airway Heights, and I'm on record. Support what Airway Heights has done. Support what Medical Lake has done. Support what Spokane Valley has done. That's not the issue. It's giving the board maximum flexibility to make a decision and be done with this. That's what the motion on the floor is about.
Commissioner Kern?
I just want to clear up something. I've heard a member of this committee twice kind of allude to that what this motion is changing away from prime A. Nobody has said that we're looking at moving away from prime A. That was what was adopted by the BOCC in January of 2025. And the attached table laid out how prime A was used with population allocations, not the housing allocation. I just want to make sure there's an understanding. There's insinuations that this is about prime A. That is not what's being developed. I think we all agree prime A is the tool being used. The crux of the issue here is population versus housing unit. And I do want to reference an email that was sent to Scott Chesney. It's in our packet. It's online for everyone to see from Melissa from Commerce. And one of the bullet points says, the inputs to the HAP allocation method are a local decision and are not mandated by the state. So again, I asked this question probably half a dozen times at this meeting last month. Who made the call to put in the housing units? And everybody tap dance around that question. Nobody would take ownership of who said to use the housing allocation as opposed to population. So I'll throw it out today, whoever. And it's extremely frustrating. I had a conversation with somebody that is totally unconnected to this board. Just that they were asking, what some of the stuff the county's working on. And I explained the situation with this whole process, housing versus population, and how there's this push that, well, now we need to change it to housing, even though the county already adopted population. And they had the perfect analogy. They said, that sounds like a student that did the homework wrong and is now going back and trying to get the teacher to change the assignment. And it's like, damn, that's a really good that's a great analogy of what this is. Somebody didn't follow directions
and nobody's willing to fess up to it.
Okay, I'm gonna go, Mayor Cooper, Joel, Councilman McCliskey.
Yes. So I guess this goes back when we talk about the comments of the past and my question last time, and it's still the same one. I want the Board of County Commissioners to go back, repeal that decision, remove the table, adopt the primary, which they've already done, but because I think it's more like you turned in your term paper and all of your reference materials were for another paper. I think that's the, if you're going to use that analogy, but, back to a comment earlier, about the data and do we have it right? So this is a guiding document, so I don't think there's a right so much per se. Data looks backward. This is a plan looking forward. And so we're making our best guess. And at the end of the day, the jurisdictions that are asking, we know, we've done the work, we're ready to go. Months and months and months and months of work and landed on, the housing share model, which is what Prime A talked about. And so Airway Heights, so there's also the philosophy, as elected officials, if my neighboring city is asking for something and it doesn't harm me, it doesn't harm my city, I fully support that. Airway Heights continues to say, we can't grow that much there. This is going to mess up our numbers, all the things that this decision will impact. And so I strongly suggest that this group come up with a recommendation that supports what our local jurisdictions want, the work that's already been done, the recommendation went forward. I don't think the who made the mistake is as important as there is a mistake and let's just fix it. It's not the who, it's the what. So what happened? There was a mistake. It was easy. There was a decision made, the wrong document was attached. Go back, repeal that, make a new decision, use the right table, and then let's ask the county commissioners that our recommendation would be to use the housing share because it accommodates well, the needs of our neighbors and our local jurisdictions who are working hard with the growth that's happening outside of the city of Spokane, and as those UGA changes are going to be happening in the unincorporated area. So that's my thoughts there.
Okay, Joel.
So I would also say we made a mistake, but I would say go back further. I don't think this was an initial mistake. I think when we looked at the first version, we were looking at the housing allocation, housing share allocation. I don't think any of us at this table could say they understood what was going on. If you say that, I would challenge you that we really understood it. PTAC gave us some information. It was never voted on by this board at that point in time. Unless you guys can remind me when we actually voted on it, I don't think we did. I'm not a voting member, so I don't think you guys did. But the challenge we have is that we didn't learn how the PTAC came to those numbers so much later. So you asked why we were having concerns. No, we found out how they were calculated. We went back to 2000 to look at numbers. We went back to the 90s. I mean, so when you look at that, I think if we would have known that's how that numbers came up, I think this committee would have made a much different decision on which option they chose. So now the county commissioners have the ability, they've seen that, they've seen how we came up with that. We've all seen it, but I fully appreciate that we've gone a long ways in the process. So how do we get ourselves out of this? And is there a model? I think that's one of your questions was, if we go with what we have and say we plan based on this, because the answer to the question is the market's scared to death with these allocations, what we put together. We don't, if you look at what the representative from Washington said, you would likely not to occur that. So I would say the market feels like a lot of these things are likely not to occur. So we're gonna put a policy on the rural areas of Spokane County. I'd like to see policies on other areas of some of these cities and jurisdictions that are gonna, how is Waverly or how is, some of these small towns gonna accommodate some of these goals that they have shown they have a history of doing that. So there's a lot of issues here. So I just think that we have to look at the initial layer as well. I think the commissioners are well aware of the initial layer that was put out. And so that's why, and I understand you say it's the industry driven decrease, but we made some issue. We didn't understand when we started this process. And so now we're dealing with ramifications of that. I understand cities, counties, made all the time and staff. I appreciate that. I don't think you can fix it in a 6 month period, but how do we fix it going forward?
Yeah.
And so I think there's some things needing to be done.
Councilman Quisky?
It's good to remind ourselves that it was the PTAC's job to understand the technical parts and that we agreed on a methodology. We asked the PTAC to come back with a recommendation. They used the housing allocation, what it says in the directions, and that's what we went forward with. The table discussion, there was supposed to be a population table and a housing allocation table. And the county accidentally pasted the population table twice, is my understanding of what happened with the resolution, but we did adopt a prime and we were using the housing methodology. Where now we're asking the PTAC to explain to us how it works and what happens, and then second guessing them when they explain it to us, and they're our plan. But I agree with Mayor Cooper that we need to prep the table and use the housing allocation. It is the thing that makes most sense. It's the way that we've always done it. And that's what we asked for. And then we're kind of going back on what we asked for.
Scott, was the wrong table attached?
No.
Thank you.
There was, if you look at the two tables that were appended to the resolution, one number is different, and there was a number in the top line number that was, I don't know if it was a typo or something, but they were both population tables. But one was said, this was previously put here in error, there's a typo, this is the correct table. At the time the resolution went forward, the population inputs were what were on the table. As Spencer and others have said, PTAC was working on the housing allocations before this went to the board, but they didn't come out in a memo to the steering committee until later after the board had acted. And that memo came from PTAC, and that's also where it was referenced that PTAC felt there was no need, that this did not change the board's endorsement of the HAP prime method. And so no, the table that was there was not a mistake. It was a correction of an error. But also later on, the PTAC memo just said, no, we didn't see any reason to change the methodology when we all in PTAC started moving to the HAP, the housing law.
So the document, the resolution adopted by the TOCC has the correct table in it.
It has the population table, which
Yes.
was being discussed at the time, yes.
Because the housing allocation numbers had not even been released by Commerce, correct?
Well, not by Commerce, but PTAC had not formalized a recommendation on housing numbers at that time.
Thank you.
But then after that, did the Department of Commerce come out and say that the methodology to be used would be the housing allocation? Or that's what it should be used?
The email that I have from Commerce says the inputs to the HAP allocation method are a local decision and not mandated by the state.
So if we use the housing allocation for ours, that's local jurisdiction, right?
Had we made that decision, maybe, but nobody made that decision.
Commissioner?
That I know, no one's willing to say they're the ones that made the call. That's the thing I'm also trying to figure. Who was it?
I don't have all the, I guess I could look at the agendas or go back, but I mean, wasn't it February or that this was at the next SCEO meeting? This was presented, the housing share tool was presented, the table was presented. And the recommendation was we didn't have to adopt anything. Well, now we're saying, well, maybe we should adopt something for the record. We probably should have done it a year and a half ago, but it was presented by county staff and PTAC staff to this full, maybe we didn't quite understand your point, Joel. Maybe we didn't quite understand, because we are not the technical experts. I'm definitely not. But it was presented at one of these meetings in early 2025, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was a memo from PTAC announcing that it had moved to the housing allocations and that it didn't require new action by the county board. That memo came out in late January of 25. And so those numbers have been seen for a year and a half.
Just want to make sure that.
Right.
But it was also based on the recommendations of the Department of Commerce.
Well, we've got Mayor Cooper first, and then we'll go to Joel.
Yeah, just follow up, so we seem to continue to circle around and there's so much emphasis on who got it wrong, and I don't care. It seems like, the county feels defensive, like we made a decision and we didn't do anything wrong. We used the information that gave us. I believe you. PTAC says, oh my gosh, all this work we put into it, and we've been part of all those meetings. That wasn't what it was intended. It was the housing share that was actually the numbers that we used, and gee, somewhere along the line there was a miscommunication, and I can see how, because of how long it's taken, how much work has gone into it. I think what do we need to do to fix it? Again, I know there's a motion on the table. I would oppose the motion, and I'm prepared to make a motion that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners strike prior, and that they adopt this housing share, that we make an official stance that that's what we're supporting at this time, and just to reconcile this conflict. We just keep going around and around, and we can't seem to get past whose fault was it, when did it happen, how did it happen? Well, it obviously it happened because we're stuck. So all of the how it happened and who did it, and all of that isn't as important right now as what is the best path forward. So I would just like to have a recommendation from this body. It's where that's what we were tasked to do, and by golly, we should do it, because we need to send a recommendation, and the county will, as elected officials, make their decision and have to stand behind it. But I can't stand behind not having a recommendation that goes back to the housing share option that all of the work went into and landed there eventually. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just make a really quick comment and I'll go to you, Joel. Regardless of what we do, my thought would be that we should maybe consider amending the countywide planning policies, the monitoring area section, so that we're looking at both sets of numbers as we move forward, so that we can really understand where did we get it right, where did we get it wrong, and for data purposes and analytical purposes moving forward into future planning efforts, we would know what is a closer set of numbers. Because I think once we move on, whichever way we go, the other set is going to be forgotten and we won't even think back on it in 5 years. So I think it's something that we should just monitor both, regardless of what we decide here today or what the commissioners decide. And so I'll just throw that out there if that's of interest to anybody. Joel.
I'll just mention that, I'm just trying to recall, going back in time, looking at that period of time, and even Mr. Gardner said something that reminded me, is that time it was always put out that this can be adjusted, and it was always so that it was presented to us, it was like we always knew the county commissioners could adjust it at some point and simply allocate. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that this was never set in stone with that, because that was presented to us and we never voted on it. That was part of the discussion, that this could all be reallocated at some point in time by either this committee or the county commission.
You have a comment? Just a quick point of order. That is this next agenda item, is to look at that reconciliation or that monitoring and report process that both of you just mentioned. So yes, we introduced that because of the uncertainty of this process as it was going along, to have that GMA sanctioned tool available to us.
Councilman Clifton.
Just want to reiterate what Mayor Cooper said and mention it doesn't really matter if there was a mistake made by this group the size of jurisdiction. The two planners that we were working with, not even hearing. And so we can't go back and completely know exactly what happened. We need to know what we want to do moving forward. And I think there's some pretty good majority
I'm sorry.
opinion that we need to move forward.
Are we off?
No, they're not able to hear you.
Oh, they can't hear you.
Sorry, Kitty.
As Steve pointed out there.
Go ahead.
I just know who other, I can't.
Oh,
see who this-
so would you
Yeah.
mention who the other board members are?
Yes, I'll let you know I'll tell you those.
Mayor Cooper, I didn't know if there's any other board members.
So we have Mayor Kaminskis, we have Megan Heller, Patrick Birch, Paul Dillon, Shauna Beast, and Terry Cooper.
for the knowledge of who's.
Sure.
Also.
Yeah.
So I just want to agree with Mayor Cooper that it doesn't really matter how and if there was a mistake made. The two planners we were working with when we had these discussions are no longer with the county. And so we can't ask them to go back and remember exactly why they did what they did or what got put where. What we need to do is decide what we're doing moving forward. And I think there's a pretty good majority of the group that wants to make a recommendation and that has used the housing allocation. And so I think we should move forward and do that and represent our views and our perspectives.
That's the question. Commissioner, you mentioned earlier wanting flexibility. That was part of your reason for wanting a no recommendation. Is there a motion or a recommendation that could include that flexibility that would satisfy that concern?
I find the comments from Ms. Klitsky to be interesting because the last time we went through this, she was the one that sued us. And so I want to be able to be flexible enough for the board to be able to make a decision that will minimize our exposure for litigation so that we can get this thing wrapped up. I've already said multiple times, it's not my goal to change the work that Airway Heights has done, or Spokane Valley has done, Liberty Lake, or anybody else. But I want to be able to have the board have the flexibility to be able to adjust so that we avoid going to court. And so I don't know what that might be. It might not be anything. But if there is, what do? We got a timetable. And so I'm just trying to give the board the flexibility to be able to preserve what we've done and get it moved forward so that we can be complete with this process and feel comfortable that we're not going to spend a couple of years in court. And so that's what I'm trying to preserve. It's not to change anything as much as it is to preserve flexibility for the board. If they have to change something from the recommendation, then that creates a window for litigation. And I'm just trying to avoid the litigation by avoiding that potential conflict.
Well, I think the reason why, especially right now, thank you for bringing up litigation. We've already gotten letters from attorneys that our numbers here that differentiate from the population share is not good. So when I'm already looking at litigation for my city, based on these two numbers right here, I'm going to advocate for the work that we put in. It's already a risk that we have on the table. So letters have already been sent to our city attorney. We've already had multiple meetings surrounding that. That's why we're advocating so far. And this is just a recommendation to the board. That's all we're trying to do here, just make a recommendation. And what you guys do with that recommendation at that level, completely up to you.
Scott, do you see a way forward that preserves flexibility or the concerns that Commissioner French expressed?
One thing the PTAC discussed and did not reach a consensus on was whether the communities that are in the red numbers up there, Airway Heights, Cheney, Liberty Lake, notably, could have that extra, instead of reallocating 1,052 back to Airway Heights and do all the work they've done, simply reabsorb that back into the bucket for future allocation, and it would go into this county bucket for now, but it would leave Airway Heights, Cheney, and Liberty Lake to use the numbers that they have been using for that period of time. It would not change the city or City of the Valley number in any way. But that was brought up to PTAC, and to be fair, and Steve can either address this in some way, there was no consensus reached on whether that was a supportable option or not, or whether that consisted of a fourth option of HAP that should be handled in a different way.
That's correct. If I can chime in, consensus was not reached at the PTAC on that. So I want to make sure that's from.
PTAC supports the house allocation based on housing. And so, and we feel that's the way to avoid future litigation. That's what everyone's planned for. And 5 years, we have a check-in, mandated by the state, to your earlier question. At that point, that's when we make those adjustments if we need to make those. So we really, PTAC is a strong support.
All right, Commissioner and then Councilman.
And thank you very much for describing what happened, because that's exactly what I was commenting about at the beginning of this meeting. That's a policy decision. That's not your decision as PTAC. That's a policy decision as to how we're going to do that allocation.
PTAC felt they followed the directions and the apt rule. The council, this group, as well as the county.
We cannot hear that speaker. The speaker who spoke before you, agenda, and who's speaking now, we cannot hear online.
Mayor, he'll speak up.
So you are correct. This group and the county commissioners have the authority to make those policy decisions. PTAC is not trying to delve into those. But I do believe that PTAC was providing the technical assistance based upon the decisions that the commissioners had made through earlier decisions, particularly through in June 2024, they adopted population allocations to jurisdictions, and so using those numbers, then those equated those to the housing, and that information was brought to this group through that process. So PTAC is not trying to get a policy. I just want to make that really clear. They're trying to provide that technical assistance based upon the policy decisions with this group and
All right, Councilwoman, I think we need to settle this motion and. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman, and then we'll go to Mayor Cooper, and then we're gonna.
So since I called out about like litigation, I just want to say the best way to avoid lengthy litigation is to do a good job. And so all of us need to do that. The best way for cities to represent their legal point of view and their legal liability is to make a strong recommendation, standing up for our work and get that into the record for the hearing. The county is the ultimate decider. So there's nothing wrong with us being on record representing our work. And it doesn't stop the county from making a different decision, but it does show that we had a discussion and that we agree that this is the methodology that we used and the methodology that we want to use.
Mayor Cooper?
It's a question, Commissioner French, so the risk. And so my question is there increased risk for litigation based on the Board of County Commissioners making a decision that's a departure from the recommendation of this body? Does that create risk and I'm not saying I don't know what the decision will be, but if one recommendation comes forward and the BOCC departs from that recommendation, does that create increased risk in your mind?
Not being an attorney, I can't offer a legal opinion, but I can give you my experience, which would say, yes, it does create a risk for the county. And having been through this before, I'm risk adverse. And I'm going to try and do everything I can to not only protect the integrity of what the cities have done, and please, this motion has nothing to do with altering, and I don't know how many times I can say this, altering the work for the cities that have already finished their work. Not the goal to change that, but as the board takes an action, if we have to change anything to be able to get ourselves through this process, this will hamstring us. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, and I do hear your message, and that's what I'm just trying to understand that. The other part of it is, it seems like the controversial piece that is risky is that work was done somehow the recommendation came forward to the Board of County Commissioners that the people who did the work didn't agree that that's what was meant to come to you. To me, that's more risky than anything else we're talking about here. And I just would compel you, Commissioner French, and the Board of County Commissioners to go back and fix this error and adopt the correct methodology. And then whatever, that's more defensible that you had these years and months of work done where the technical folks and the elected officials got to this place, and then there was this departure at one point in the year. And so anyway, that's what I think that's more risky, that it's a known controversial point. And then so that's my last comment, I promise.
Okay, with that, we'll go to a vote on this motion. And depending on the outcome of that, we can entertain a new motion. And I think just for to make this easy, we'll do a roll call. So if you can say aye, but please raise your hand. So all of those in favor of the motion, as stated by Commissioner French, to make no recommendation to the commissioners, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Okay. I would entertain a new motion.
Get folks online.
Thank you. I don't know that we did.
We could just go through the roster if you want.
Yeah, Rona, would you read off the roster?
Yes.
Folks online.
Yep, that would be Mayor Beese. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Let's see.
Are you calling for a vote?
Yeah, she's gotten off. Okay, Mayor Cooper.
Nay.
Council Member Paul Dillon.
Nay.
Megan Heller. Megan.
Oh yes, we've bounced back a few times. Is it for which motion?
The motion to make no recommendations.
Um, Nay.
Mayor Kaminskis.
Nay.
And that's it for voting members.
Okay. So obviously the motion fails. So is there a new motion related to this item?
Bring that motion to, for the recommendation of adopting the HAP with the housing share input. To bring it to the board and commissioners as written for the housing share.
Is there a second to that motion?
Could you please repeat the motion for those of us online who could not hear all of that?
You restated the motion as louder.
Yeah, recommendation to adopt the HAP with the housing share input and rural to UGA reallocations.
It's been waiting a second.
Okay, comments? That's one.
Not for a friendly amendment that we had prime pay, so we're very specific. Yes.
Yes, I'll go ahead and change the motion to adopt for the HAP a prime methodology with the housing share input.
Councilman Wick, you're fine with the modification. Okay. Any further comments on this motion? I know we talked quite a bit. So not seeing any hands online, not seeing any. Okay, well, we will take a vote, and again, we'll do a roll call. So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And anybody online?
Mayor Cooper.
Cooper
Aye.
and Minsky's?
Mayor Cooper's aye, yeah. And Megan Heller, sorry.
Okay. And then Dylan.
And Councilman Dillon.
Aye.
Mayor Kaminskis.
Aye.
Okay, I think we got everybody.
Okay, and any opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Online, did everybody vote?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion carries. So with that, unless there's anything else related to that specific item, we will move on to growth and reassignment.
May I make one comment? And sorry to just belabor this, but I like the comment. I think it might have been, well, I don't know who said it, but because I can only see a little piece of the panel. But would it behoove us? It's a question. Would it behoove us to acknowledge that we're using the housing share model, but that we do capture this, that these were the two methodologies that were looked at? We will have more data in 5 years. We can compare it to this, and then we have a real then that gives us something real, like which way are we really trending? And we can look at it again in 5 years and change it then if needed. I think it's important because there was a lot of discussion that we capture this, track the data, see where we land, and make another decision and it might be back to that population. I don't know, but just a thought there, and if that requires a motion, fine, or a footnote, I don't know, but
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, that was my suggestion, and I can't make a motion, but I would certainly entertain that at some point if folks have interest, because I think that would make a lot of sense. Scott, do you want to go and introduce?
I do. I do want one point of clarification to make sure we had the motion right. Councilmember Bowman, your motion did include the county's reallocation of rural to urban population, correct?
Yeah, and rural to UGA reallocations.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we had that for the record. Second item is what Chairman Cathcart and Mayor Cooper were just talking about, the monitoring and reporting situation. We put up one slide in here about where the county planning policies are. You've seen this, it's been in your packet. And there is one comment we heard from PTAC and others, and that's that the statutory citation is no longer necessary. This was originally crafted out of the buildable lands approach. This is now simply a countywide planning policy, so that statutory reference is no longer needed. The rest of it is as it is in your document. The overview is fairly simple, and it gets to what we were just talking about, monitoring our growth on an annual basis and reporting that so that at such time, 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, the steering committee has a sense of how we are growing by jurisdiction, and we can use that information to either reallocate or adjust or reflect how the market is responding to our allocations. So this would add to the countywide planning policies to make that a reporting requirement.
Okay. So with that, we will, let's see if we've got any comments on this specifically. Growth. It's the homeownership, so that's next. Preliminary, that's later. Okay, so no yellow sheets. Anybody wanting to comment on this really quick from the public? PTAC, PTAC, you want to go ahead and give your recommendation or your input?
Yeah, I just want to mention that, we're 6 months away from adoption of statutory adoption of our comp plans. And so doing something this late, making new family planning policies just creates a burden on all the jurisdictions. It would require modifications to those plans in most, if not all of the jurisdictions. So although there are some technical issues with both of these family planning policies, because it's so late, we encourage the steering committee to pause on these policies until after completion of the site.
Okay, Councilwoman.
I'm happy to go along with PTAC recommendation here and wait to adopt this, but I like this idea. So I did want to offer, could we also add a meeting to this so that it's not just a report with no discussion? Because I'd rather sit around and talk about our strategies and our policies if we see things within this report instead of just getting a report, not doing anything.
That'd be a great idea. Maybe it could be established for the, whichever meeting we have in the first quarter of the year, something like that. To look back at the previous year.
Not be much after the comp plans are updated or.
Oh, it would force a meeting.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Okay, other comments, Commissioner? And then.
Yes, on this one, I just think it's, I think I spoke 2 months ago when we met, that I think it's really important that we do a more frequent review. I'm just wondering if an annual, I know when we first started discussing this and I had conversations with Mr. Chesney, and, you know, we had several conversations as a steering committee. Are we gonna have enough data annually that is like meaningful? That's just a question. I think originally we had talked to about it, like every 3 to 5 years, but I don't know. Again, I'm fine with. I'm just wondering if an annual report that the jurisdictions have to produce, if we're gonna have enough new data annually to be able to have any meaningful conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
From, I guess, a technical perspective, the idea of gathering data annually and reporting doesn't mean this group has a sufficient database to act on that. But rather than wait 5 years and then go back and go, well, let's collect all the data from 2027 going forward. It seems prudent to at least start collecting that data on an immediate basis so that there is that data that can be used as a decision whenever this group feels that there's an anomaly or a deviance from the recommended allocations to the actual growth. That might be in 2 years, if the market adjusts, it might be in 5. But we would certainly suggest that there's no reason to delay this in terms of collecting data and moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if we'll have a lot of new information, but it gets us on the track of collecting the data, which would be good.
Commissioner French, and then we'll go to Mayor Cooper.
Yeah, on the list of things that should be monitored, I would like to suggest that also include implementation documents and code revisions. You know, we have aspirational documents and then we don't follow it up with adoption of codes that will actually implement the plan. And, you know, I think about the city's comp plan, and cornerstone of it was infill development. It only took them 19 years to develop the codes. So we gotta be more timely than that. So I want to add that to the list.
Mayor Cooper.
Commissioner French, I was thinking that too, policy, procedure, and code updates as we trend forward. And then if we're that first line, population growth in comparison to population target allocations, if the recommendation is to move to housing target allocations, should we also, maybe we should put population and housing in this so that we're tracking both, and maybe that's better than adopting the chart, but we can adopt it here, that we're gonna do population growth in comparison and to those population targets, housing growth in comparison to housing targets. I would like to see that added.
My suggestion would be that we look at this for both sets of unaltered or original numbers for population and housing, and then if there's any changes, what that final adopted number or sheet looks like. That'd be my suggestion. I just think it makes a lot of sense to compare it to those for that data analysis reason.
Yeah, both, right?
Yeah.
Great.
Councilmember Wood.
Yeah, I was just gonna highlight, well, it's not on the slide in the packet, there's the one page of the policy does list both population.
Does it?
I think what we're actually voting on is the page top.
It's the document as a whole, correct? We just threw up a quick summary slide because we knew you had a document.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So you're referring to 2.1 in the document. That would.
Yeah, the policy topic monitoring growth.
Yeah, it does. And then I was just gonna say that maybe in section 4, we could add a sentence to your suggestion, Councilmember Blitzky, about like an annual meeting or something to review the data. I don't know, in section 4, it says the SCEO process shall be used to review and consider mitigation measures to increase regional consistency at any time during the subsequent. But maybe that's talking to the 5-year period. Anyway, I don't know if there's a suggestion from staff about where to put in like an annual meeting expectation. But I think that's important, because if we just produce reports and they sit on a shelf and we're not discussing what we're learning, we're not really doing anything.
Hospital.
As far as the monitoring the growth, the city of Airway Heights recommends this policy section not be adopted. The data collection is unrealistic for smaller cities. It requires annual tracking of sales price variance, no absorption, and medium sell rent prices. Airway Heights does not generate and purchases data. It may be available through GSI or EWU, but the obligation should not fall on individual cities. Annual review is too soon to detect any meaningful trends. Just reiterating, hey, on an annual basis, we're not going to have that data in a year. Maybe any changes, we look at another 2 years, 3 years down the road, and then determine whether or not we have, an annual section in there. And then creates allocation instability with no recourse. The VOCC could adjust the population allocations outside of the periodic update process with no defined appeal right, no recourse mechanism, and no funding for affected jurisdictions. Jurisdictions need stable final allocations by December 2026 to complete our housing elements, LS analysis, and for our plans. And then the employment trend tracking is out of the scope for smaller cities. Also, 3.4 requires annual tracking of employment trends. Small communities do not generate or purchase this data. So, as far as Airway Heights is concerned, we do not recommend the adoption of the monitoring data.
Scott, can I ask, so, I understand on an annual basis, that, there may be some issues there, but is this data, regardless of jurisdiction, gonna still have to be collected and analyzed in 5 years? Or will that not be the case across?
There's a diligence that all professional planners would be required to consider, which is to look at all data sources to determine how is that growth plan manifests itself. So that's, in the GMA world, it's both housing and an employment side. Now, to Bishop Bowman's concern, smaller jurisdictions, aren't set up for that sort of tracking. But generally that does occur through GSI or through the bigger jurisdictions that can do that. So there's some accommodation that can be made for those jurisdictions that feel unable to produce this. But the body of work from a planning perspective is very informative in helping us decide how we're growing.
Do we contemplate some kind of partnership that we can use to accommodate the small cities? Because I think all those points are very fair. We need to figure that out before we move forward. Because you can't necessarily count on some of these agencies unless we've talked to them first. I know Priority Spokane might be folding. So GSI might be the obvious partner, or the county can take all of that on themselves.
We just don't currently collect the data.
Yeah.
Which way do you want us to do so?
It seems there's both a level of local data that we all track, building permits among them, and then there is regional data, and jobs and absorption may not be tracked by smaller communities, but we have to try, at least the global county as a whole, we need to track them to understand our economic health. So are we growing in certain areas? Are we growing in certain industries? Did things change? And even in the connection back to GMA, which is somewhat elementary because it assigns an employment number based on sort of geographic and population growth. That's a little bit old school, but it's defensible. But being able to look back at a real world look at, here's what's come in this last year, we start to build that record, for our communities. Are we growing in a new sector that we didn't anticipate before and we would not have seen had we not been tracking the numbers? All of that said, the smaller jurisdictions, I totally agree, are not set up to do that. In fact, we're not totally even set up to do that on the bigger jurisdictions. It's something we would have as an aspirational goal and figure out how to do it. And there are those resources from GSI to realtors to others the data exists. It's a question of us reaching out and pulling that into our planning world so we can provide you with a better snapshot of how we're growing, every year.
I mean, does that come with a cost share or how do we collect the data?
Include language about establishing that partnership. Please come up.
Yeah, so our language says that the SCEO shall maintain a monitoring process. And Spokane and the cities shall jointly monitor and follow. So I feel like this would have to have some kind of modification in order to be fair to the small cities. But I don't know what my amendment would be yet.
I mean, we could have language that says, you know, essentially this applies to the big three and to the extent it applies to other jurisdictions, it shall be decided by a date certain or something of that nature that this board could then identify in the meantime. I don't know, just making that up off the top of my head, but
You need something.
potentially. Nikki, did you have your hand up?
Just as a side note, one of the things that each of these towns, small towns look forward to is the population that OFM gives us, whether we come up with that ourselves or we have to give them building permit information, and that's how they come up with that information. So to me, the biggest trigger is knowing the difference in the population each year. Did you know right then and there that, okay, and we had more building permits than usual, or however it works, but that to me is the number one. The number two things that would make a town take notice, and then they scramble trying to figure out what they're supposed to do next. But
Cool.
I understand the concerns. I look at this and for small towns, they may have 3 building permits a year. You know, and then they don't think of having any annexation, so just to define to track that. I get the real estate. I think that's one area that I can see that, but I think that's something that could easily try and talk to the, you know, treasurer or the county offices. They can pull those reports fairly easily. Those are recorded by the county, so. I think we're making a bigger issue of this for the small towns and probably maybe, I understand for the larger communities, but I think they all track those already. I know I can get a building permit report from the city or the county anytime I want. Those are online mostly, so I don't want to make it sound simpler than it is. Maybe I'm missing something, but if you're doing annexation, that city better have the annexation of that last year. That would be a big issue for a small city. I just don't see that this is a major. Even Everly Heights, I don't see it as a major issue. In fact, this, yeah, I understand they're busy people, but I track building permits all the time, and it's not that difficult to see the pieces around it.
Possible.
What do you think about 2 points to the availability and affordability of housing such as year-over-year sales, annual absorption, sales price variance, and median sales rent prices by type? I think that would be part of it, right?
Yeah. I think the rent would be the hardest part to get to. I think that would be, but sales, I think you could find that, see the variances year to year, because that would be just took an average sale price and you can do that year to year. So I don't think the variance would be over year to year. I don't think it'd be somewhere you actually talk. So I don't think that's gonna be, like I said, that's a county record. So it's so the county can provide to each jurisdiction. They know exactly the jurisdiction those permits were filed in, sales were filed in. So I'd love to, we could talk to the realtors, I'm guessing they track these as well, so, but I know the county has those records, I don't. It's the rental piece, I think maybe we would have to look at that, but I don't see any other issues. But like I said, I'm not saying I watch these things regularly, I don't see this, how this is gonna be a major time suck for staff, I just don't see it. Especially if you do it once a year, I mean, it's a project, but yeah, very quickly.
Councilman, did you have your hand up?
I did, that was just, it seemed like it was mentioned earlier that in section 2.3 that seems to be the heartache. Maybe we just put in there because the population and building permits and the annexation seem like it's gonna give us the lion's share of the data. Maybe we just add a when available to section 2.
I think the sales data would be really easy to calculate. I don't see that as being a issue at all. It's supporting the report the county does that.
Yeah, so some collaboration mechanism shall be established for cities under 50,000 population or something like that by July 1, 27, or whatever.
And analytics is super important on the business owner, right? I have to be able to predict, I have to be able to do a lot. If the data's there for us, and I mean, maybe this is something that we pull together and say, hey, this is the one resource that we are going to use. We can extrapolate that data out. And, it's a quick monitor at that point. It's not arduous, it's not, requiring us to do a ton of work, a ton of back end stuff, try to go capture that data, to try to go get it, which has a financial burden, a manning hour burden on us. It has a lot, right? So that's the only reason why I believe that we are against this. That's why I'm against it. But at the end of the day, if there's something there that where we as smaller cities don't have to, or if that data is provided, yeah, it would be good for us to look at it. But the data would have to be open to all of us here. And having one source, one.
That's all public record, in my opinion. Right.
Commissioner Fresh, did you have your hand up? No. Mayor Cooper?
Like, thank you. I agree for the small jurisdictions. Some of this is outside of what we're used to doing for sure. I maybe just to change the language and maybe I didn't hear and it's already been suggested, but where it says jurisdiction should create a monitoring program. When we have to create a program, that's the problematic part. But if we could adopt standards for reporting permits and with already available data. And so I think that might just be an easier way to say that instead of monitoring program. Then that's like a full-blown report and we have to monitor and we have to supervise. We have to constantly, but if it's just what are the permits, what are the housing things, working with realtors, but if we just create a methodology for capturing and reporting the data that's already readily available, like to Joel's point, this is public record stuff. We have it, we don't need to recreate something as much as we just need to track and report what's available. And I think some softer language might help us.
On that, does anybody have a motion they would like to make? Council?
I'll make a motion to create a subcommittee to figure out the jurisdictional responsibilities out and adjust the mechanism.
Second.
Any thoughts on that? My only thought is just a date certain. I mean, how, subcommittee kind of take a long time or act quick. I'm just not sure what our goal is.
I don't think any of us wants that. It's okay.
Well, I think just bringing it back to the cities and seeing what's actually realistic. And what is it something that we're going to have to create a program for, or is there something that we could just, pull that data that we already have and submit? That's what has to be kind of rushed through there. I want to make sure that whatever we give is not just accurate, because again, we always have concerns over litigation, we always have concerns over other stuff, but I don't want to again back us into a corner where yet again where Heights is having to do something else, whereas the Manning with a huge budget deficit that we're already in, plus not to mention personnel issues, and we have a need to add on in almost every department across the city, which I'm sure every jurisdiction does, but we're already doing a lot with Orla.
You had a question about time. Maybe the subcommittee could give the cities some time to make a recommendation to the subcommittee first and then meet and tweak the language. But we need people willing to be on the subcommittee first.
Process it through the councils.
Any other, Mayor Cooper?
Yeah, along those lines, just recommend then that between now and our next meeting that we convene with the small cities and those who are concerned about 9.1 and come up with some softer language and recommendation for the wording of 9.1 to come before the next meeting. Then we have a timeline and a task. It's not, a years long thing, but just I think it's just what can we really do, and not taking the time here to hash through all of that, but giving a quick deadline.
I would clarify 9.1 and 2.3, I think are the issues in your phase.
So right now, this would just push it back to the jurisdiction for us to make a recommendation to this body of whether or not to proceed forward with a subcommittee. Or are you trying to form a subcommittee right now?
Well, on that note, Scott, do you have some thoughts?
One option, this is put on here as a public hearing. It was noticed 21 days ahead of time with that document. You or the chair can continue the public hearing. You don't have to make a decision today. You could continue the public hearing to July. In that time, staff could survey all of our constituent communities and say, what are your thoughts? What are your interests? We can compile that, bring it back to you ahead of the July meeting. And then if that information was sufficient, you could adopt the policy at that time, or if it looked like it wanted more consideration, then Councilmember Klitzky's idea of handing that packet over to a smaller subcommittee to refine it would be perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I think I guess I'm speaking. So you're saying the county would take the lead on reaching out and getting input if there was any changes to this and bringing that forth next month, or what are you saying to the
We have
forming that
sure.
small?
This has been in front of PTAC for a while, and it's generated some comment there, which has generally resulted in what's in front of you. PTAC meets again, the first week in July, but the county would be happy to do a wider survey to steering committee members and say, give us your priorities in the next 2 weeks, and we'll bring that back for PTAC and then for this discussion in July. We can take the lead at that information gathering. That's not terribly onerous.
And then you produce maybe some an updated document for us to consider.
Oh yeah, of course, we would set in, the public hearing, the point is to gather that commentary, incorporate that where there's a consensus, we're incorporating it so you can choose how to act on that at a continued hearing in July.
Yeah, because my thought was that the county might be able to collect some of this data for all the jurisdictions, with our assessor data or whatever that is, so that and I don't know that for sure. And I know Jason in our budget office does a really good job crunching data for the Board of County Commissioners around economic trends. So those are just things that are in my head, like, oh, some of those, I wonder if he could also crunch some of these numbers, for all the jurisdictions. Because he's already, those are just some thoughts, but I don't know. So I think taking some time to look into it and coming up with what those data points are, and if the county can come up with those, I think all the cities, that would be great. I don't know if that's the case, but at least it would give us some time to explore.
The county does have some tools like the assessor's office, the treasurer's office that can monitor, property information. But it was county planning's purpose of bringing this forward through PTAC and others to reinforce the collaborative nature of this being a reporting function from all the communities, so that it wasn't just a top-down function. Oh, we see how you're growing, you're not meeting your target allocations, we're going to do something about it. We thought it was important for each of those cities to be able to look at these data, bring them back, and put them into context of how they're fitting their communities.
Right, I'm speaking to more like the general data, like 2.3 on here. Market data, et cetera. Yeah. No, I still think it's important because we don't know what permits are being, considered in Airway Heights. So that's only jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Oh, knowing that I will be the one going to the 5 pounds.
We'll help you, Nikki.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we make user friendly, why we're doing this, and break it down, like it says, like population in growth was, so what was our target population? You guys have the land capacity for us, we don't have that. And then the others, you know, but we've got set sewer systems out there that when they were built, they had a capacity with them. Unfortunately, with I happening and less being able to hack to even get close because of the leakage, that changes too. So it's interesting. But sure, I know you'll help me then.
And that's I mean, it's a very good point. So much of these data and issues are related to the metro core because of the predominance of growth. But the county, for these last few years has tried to really establish a better partnership with the small towns through the Climate Act and all these other things. We'd like to continue that in as helpful way as we can to help monitor that and maybe suggest ideas for the small towns plans. And as we noted before, we've been engaging the Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association much more than we have in the past. We're trying to provide a better forum for the small cities to have a chance to bring their issues, to an organization like this through you. So yeah, you've got our commitment that we will help you.
So my error, I didn't close the public hearing. And so we do have one more commenter online, and so we'll go to them and then we can take care of this motion and closing.
Paul?
Yeah, Paul.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Just one on this matter. Early in the discussion, it was, and what is shown on the screen is taking out the reference to the RCW about review and evaluation. What was the reason for that? Why should that be struck to taken out?
Paul, I can address that. This initiative started as an adaptation of what's called the targeted reconciliation process, which is incorporated in the buildable lands requirements for the Puget Sound counties.
Right.
And so as we moved away from that, because at least, at the moment, there's no consensus about whether Spokane should be in a buildable lands environment or not. We put it back into the context of a countywide planning policy, and this citation was related back to the buildable lands. And so we just
okay, so it's incorrect. All right, thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Paul. So with that, I'll declare the public hearing closed. On this motion, we can, with unanimous consent, it can be withdrawn, or we can dispense with it, an up or down vote. You want to just leave it on the table? If there's a motion to table. Okay, all in favor of tabling the current motion that Councilman Klitzky has made, say aye. Aye. Any opposed online?
Nothing.
No, I voted aye.
Yeah, this is Councilmember Dillon. I said aye.
Okay. All right, so that passes. Is there any other motion related to this? Do we need to make a motion to task what we've discussed, or no? Are we able to just leave this as it is? Okay. So with that then, unless I see any hands, no, let's move on to homeownership.
There are no slides for this. You have the draft. You've had both red line and the clean version in your packets for some time. The more recent one was sent out with the notice for this meeting. This relates to augmenting the countywide planning policies for housing to add language in various elements that talks about a priority for promoting home ownership. There was a subcommittee. That group met 3 times and then some comments back and forth. The document before you is our best representation of where the subcommittee left that off. Mr. Frank submitted comments earlier for your consideration for today. Those were the only other comments we received from the document.
And I'll open the public hearing. We've got one signed up so far. Jim, you want to come on up? And if there's others, fill out the sheet, or if you're online, raise your hand.
We can drop these around.
Okay, I'll just put it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody has some comments on this document to, I don't know if that was to this
Oh.
body or just to the board.
Council, did you guys have technical comments or?
Yes, the city of Irway Heights City Council is almost provided this new elections and provided it to the county. And presumably it was not delivered to the city yesterday afternoon, and so it should all be in the notices today.
If you want to elaborate after Jim goes, I'd be happy to come back to you and have you elaborate if you'd like. Yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. I was a member of the subcommittee that was appointed by the steering committee to look at the policy language around homeownership. I don't really want to argue about the details of the language. In some ways, this is a first step. And we take a first step to try to deal with housing quality and not just housing numbers. And the housing crisis that we're dealing with is really less than a decade old. While it has seeds in some restrictive zoning policies that go back, decades maybe. In 2015, 10 years ago, the Spokane median home price was $179,000 10 years ago. Our response to this crisis is relatively new, and the solutions that we're coming up with are still being tested across the nation. And a lot of the response has been solely on numbers. Let's build apartments. Apartments are easy to build. Let's build more apartments, and that solves the problem, and that solves the supply side. But a response to this crisis raises the bigger question. Are we solving for housing numbers or the quality of everyday life that we provide our residents? The question is no longer simply how many homes can we build, but it's what kind of lives are those homes making possible? That quote I just read is from a national housing consultant. It's dealing with housing crisis issues across the country. And I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that the initial approach that we've taken to this housing crisis of simply building apartments and making it very easy to build apartments is we've lost sight of the quality of housing that we're providing people and the quality and kind of communities that we're going to end up with 20 or 30 years from now. And all you have to do is drive around town and see the cold, sterile apartments that are being constructed. No open space is even required in apartments. You can have 100% site coverage with no open space. Spokane Housing Authority in Spokane Valley built about 300 units with no open space for families, no connection to any neighborhood. So that housing, there's real people living real lives in that housing, and that has to be a factor that we consider. And that's why this issue of middle housing and providing, to start thinking about the quality of housing we're providing is really important. I don't want to argue about the little details of the language because there's a subject here that's very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Heather, would you like to comment?
Thank you very much. I'm Heather Trotman, Director of Building and Planning for the City of Irway Heights, and I'm here on behalf of the City of Irway Heights City Council. They submitted a letter to both the Steering Committee of Elected Officials as well as the Board of County Commissioners on today's proposal. This letter, unfortunately, was not provided until nearly 4 o'clock last night, and so my understanding is that some people may not have a copy of this letter. Our Chair and Mayor of the City of Airway Heights is available today to speak to this issue with regards to home ownership. It identifies a number of factors of concerns for the city, and I would be happy to turn this over to our mayor to speak to the concerns from the city council.
Okay. Go ahead.
So one thing that we have is one side candidate does not fit local condition. Airway Heights is 66% ownership, 33% rental. Our major employers, obviously Fairchild Travel Casinos, Amazon facilities generate strong rental demand due to transit, military, and entry-level shift work. A countywide mandate ignores this reality. Deep affordability makes ownership unworkable. 69% of our allocations fall in the 0 to 80% AMI range. Local nonprofits have confirmed homeownership is very difficult and sometimes impossible. In the 0 to 50% AMI band, which accounts for 2,250 of our local units. The draft contains unrealistic and undefined language. The GMA requirements overview still contains the internally contradictory language we flagged, referring to both the middle housing and a full range of housing as the standard without resolving the conflict. Terms remain undefined. And then the redlining failure is a protocol problem. Significant new policy language, including the plan for attainable home ownership paragraph and revised policy 1.1b and 1.2b is not identified by underlined bold or color in the red line draft. Agencies and the public cannot review what they cannot see. Applies uniformity to all jurisdictions except policy 3.7. All other policies apply regardless of city size, population, or local housing condition. This conflicts with the discretion provided under our CW 36.70A and Department of Commerce guidance. And untimely LCA requirements, adding new land capacity analysis requirements in June 2026 with periodic updates due to December 2026 does not allow adequate time for jurisdictions to comply with this. So it is our recommendation that we do not adopt the CBP home ownership policy top 7 to the BOCC.
Thank you. Ben?
Hello, my name is Dan. I'm with Habitat. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of tracking tenure. So when we're looking at the tenure of ownership versus the tenure of rental, and we're looking jurisdiction by jurisdiction and sort of the provision of those different tenure options. It is really important to track because tenure is really one of the last areas where local jurisdictions have a lot of control over the development standards that can affect kind of what is a viable tenure. So understanding where a homeownership project is being produced or underproduced is really important because that might flag jurisdictions that maybe have overly complicated or maybe not fully fleshed out subdivision standards or potentially they have elements of their development code that make utility provision for homeownership particularly complicated. And so it's particularly important as an affordable homeownership developer that we're at least tracking these things. So then that can flag where we, as folks that try to give constructive feedback on local code development, can go and work with those jurisdictions to identify maybe unintended areas of their development standards that could be barriers to development of ownership specifically. We're very typology neutral. We build middle housing, condos, small houses on small lots. But even with those new sorts of middle housing, there are parts of the development code that make the provision of those for ownership particularly difficult and the provision of those for rentership particularly easy. So identifying those elements of the development code and sort of addressing them is important, and tracking this data will help us do that. So it's an important thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, just from the public really quick, anybody with their comment, anybody online? Not seeing any? Okay, going once, twice, three times. All right, I will close the hearing on this item, and then if there's comments from the hearing committee. I saw Councilman first, and then we'll go to Commissioner Fryer. That, I saw your hand first.
I tend to agree with most of what's in the Early Heights letter. From the city of Spokane's perspective, I think the building code stuff that was mentioned by Habitat for Humanity is well taken, and we're already working on this, but I don't feel like GMA is the tool to decide homeownership matters. I think a lot of what affects the ability to build and finance homeownership opportunities is actually the finance side, and happy to also work together with jurisdictions on those policies or just inside our own jurisdiction. But this isn't the tool, I feel. So I will be opposed to this.
Commissioner.
Yeah, so when I introduced this, as electeds, we talk about providing home ownership because we know that that makes for healthier neighborhoods, healthier communities, an investment in ownership where you live. And you know, it's interesting, 2 weeks ago, I attended Skyfest out at Fairchild, and outgoing base commander and the last 5 base commanders out at Fairchild have said, we need more ownership opportunities for our enlisted ranks around the base. That has been a consistent cry from Fairchild, but it's not just Fairchild that is looking for home ownership opportunities, it's communities across the county. And while we give it lip service, we don't put any actions behind the lip service. And so what I was trying to do is say, let's start the process. Let's adopt a goal for the community that says we're going to work diligently to provide home ownership. I made the comment earlier, and I talked to a legislator on the other side of the state and asked why he didn't support condo development regulations and bringing those back. And his comment was, why would I do that? He said, because that's part of the American dream. He said, it's easier for me to regulate one landlord than 300 homeowners. Think about that. It's about regulation for him as opposed to providing an opportunity for building generational wealth and building stronger neighborhoods and stronger communities. This is a starting point. The small cities, and we talked about this at the steering committee or the task force. Should this just be limited to the 3 large jurisdictions? City of Spokane Valley, City of Spokane, and Spokane County. And the recommendation out of the group was, no, it should be a countywide goal. It should be something that all of us are trying to achieve. Originally, I was trying to shoot for a percentage. And the agreement for that was, well, let every jurisdiction set its own target. Whatever their growth was for the last 10 years, make that the goal for the next 10 years. So that the communities have the ability to meet that goal based upon their own characteristics, as opposed to trying to mandate a number. So that's also part of this. So it is an aspirational goal. We talk about, and in countywide planning policies, parks, police, fire, everything else that we think makes for a good, safe, healthy neighborhood. We don't talk about home ownership. And so, is it achievable? Yes, it is. And in fact, even in Airway Heights, the Highland Park development, they've got affordable homes that are in the 180, 190 range. So it's not as though it cannot be done. It can be, but we just need to, as a county, be much more deliberative and put some action behind our words and say, this is a goal. And each community can identify how they're going to achieve the goal, but at least we've got a goal that says we value homeownership, strong neighborhoods, safe communities, and investment into our communities as opposed to development with an abundance of apartment buildings. Anyway, that's the background for why we got to where we're at.
Yeah.
Oh, and I see the value of this, especially at the countywide level for economic development, for trying to bring in new businesses, for trying to say, hey, come to Spokane, come to our county, come to our cities, and then looking from their end of what's out there. Glad you brought up the Highland Village project. Go over there right now, and there's actually houses foreclosed. And you look at the listing on the foreclosed price, it is not $170,000. It's over $280,000 for a house that's right around 1,000 square foot with no garage. So the problem is the affordability, of houses at kind of the ground level here. And I think it should be up to each municipality what they want to do within their city. I mean, we did 3 or 4 different retreats previously. We did a ton of community outreach and said, what do we want our community to look like? And it is homeownership. It is a destination point. I mean, we're kind of driven that way because of our 2 tribal entities and what they've, elected to construct out there. But at the end of the day, hey, let's ride this way, right? We need to do this. But yes, we want housing for Fairchild. We are a huge protector of Fairchild Air Force Base. I was just talking to Chewy, after his retirement out there, the base commander and the oncoming commander, Brian, and just said, hey, what are your needs for Fairchild? What can we do to help assist? And it is those, it is homeownership. It is the opportunity for, how can I get my people in and then, deploy them, but make sure their families are actually settled in and in a good location. So, I mean, some of the problems that we've had out there is I built my house for $170 something thousand. It's worth $440, almost $450,000. You ask, a younger couple to come in there with, that's has an income of $50,000-$60,000 a year. Can they really afford my house if I choose to sell? The market's going to dictate what we do. We can't. So I would just like that, to be known that these, that's why we oppose this adoption is for everything that we put in our letter, what I read out today. And, that's the point of the Council of City Irving Heights.
I'm going to go to Mayor Cooper, and then, do I see another hand? Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner French, I completely support everything that you said. I agree with it. And I think for a small city, we have a well balanced. That's my goal, is that we keep a balance of wealth. And, we all will always have the poor among us. We have a duty there. But everybody would love to own a home someday. If you tip the balance and you're more rentals than you are homeowners, the appearance and everything about those neighborhoods can stay in a state of decline. But if you have owners within that neighborhood, early entry folks, they'll take better care of a home they own than a home that they rent. And so it begins to raise the bar of, what it looks like and caring for your home. And I understand that those folks that defaulted, that were given that opportunity as an entry level and they didn't make it, 280 is still a great entry level home for the market that we have now. But there's, I think, home ownership and making opportunities for home ownership, and that we can incentivize home ownership. And there's, Habitat for Humanity and a lot of other programs out there that I'm looking into, little cottage developments, where it's trust land and people can have early entry and they can own the home, but we own the land, or somebody nonprofit owns the land, and then when they sell it, it does sell for market value, but there's ways of incentivizing that and discounting it and using grant funds to offset that to help people get into home ownership. So as we look at all of these variables, all these things, we should be incentivizing all of it. It's false to think that just because someone owns a home, they're rich, so that's false. We've got to make a place to incentivize all of these things, and home ownership is one of the things that we should also incentivize, because there will be grant funding opportunities that are around helping low to moderate income people get into home ownership, just like Habitat for Humanity does and others. And so I think having it in there as a stated goal, I think I don't want to see mandates or, even numbers or percentages or, because you can't drive that. The market's going to determine it. But if we put it in there as a stated, this is a value. It's valuable to have own ownership, and not only, but amongst all of these other things. And so I support leaving the word home ownership being one of the policies, stated aspirations in this document, but I would not support any kind of number but I do support tracking it and seeing what is the market dictating, along with all these other important supporting all the other types of housing entry levels. So that's Medical Lake's position, is that we support the word home ownership being an aspiration and something supported in this that.
Commissioner.
I think that there's been a lot of good work done on this, and my two concerns are things that were articulated by City of Airway Heights in their letter. And the first point was, home ownership for all. One of the statements says local jurisdictions are obligated to demonstrate capacity accessible by various area medium income bands and a regulatory environment that supports the development of a full range of housing, including housing types that are available to meet housing goals and home ownership for all income levels. I think the concern is like the 0 to 30% income level. Or even 0 to 50%. Folks who are in that income band likely, I don't think Habitat, I think that usually 80 to 50 to 80%. So I think the concern was obligating all of our jurisdictions to have to figure out a way to provide housing for very low income individuals I don't think it's not possible. So, if we just said available to meet housing goals and increase home ownership, period, I think that might be a better approach, because it says earlier in that sentence, various median income bands. So
what section is it? Just so I can track.
It's the very first paragraph.
Okay, the intro.
So
Yeah, and the last sentence just says, that we'd be obligated, every jurisdiction, to demonstrate that we can meet housing goals for all income levels. I just think that's not possible. Most folks at that income level, hopefully in the future, they might be able to get to a point where they could increase their income to a point where they could be a homeowner. But I just worry about that wording, obligate all the jurisdictions. So that was just my suggestion. We could say available to meet housing goals and increase home ownership at the end of that paragraph. I was just trying to come up with a suggestion to help meet Airway Heights' concern. And then the other concern that was a similar concern that I had brought forward several times in this process is, if you keep going to the next section on page 1, it says the housing element in a jurisdiction's comp plan must minimally include the following, and it has a bunch of an inventory of housing needs, a statement of goals and policies and objectives for home ownership. And I'm just wondering, I know some communities have already completed or are almost at completion of their comp plan, and they've already gone out to public comment. So the third section talks about identifying the land capacity analysis of land reasonably and economically available based on market factors for residential development. My concern was since a lot of jurisdictions have already like, all right, 90% of completing their comp plan, can we go back now and make different jurisdictions include some of this if they've already written their plans? That's just my concern. So I think that's what Airway Heights was also concerned about, like how to. I don't know I know we're still working on our plan at the county, and we're going out for comment right now on our EIS, but that's why I think there's a concern of adopting these now when jurisdictions have already mostly written their plans. So
Well,
I just had a question about
I'll look for input on that, but I just, a couple of things really quick. There's a question about the foreclosure stuff, so I'll just throw that out there that, as to whether or not the foreclosures are happening, as stated, but more broadly speaking on this issue, I think Dana really hit it out of the park for me when he talked about just all of the obstacles that have existed and that continue to exist to creating home ownership. And when we talk about affordability, I agree with you today with all of the regulations and the obstacles and the unfriendly rules and codes and energy codes that just add a ton of cost. You're right. You could not create housing most likely that would be fee simple for somebody at that income level. But I think the goal is aspirational. Maybe there's a softer way to touch that or something. But I think the point of it is, does each jurisdiction have obstacles in place that prevents home ownership from occurring? Do we have easy short plat policies and inexpensive? Do we have really high GFC fees? Do we have all these different things that are making it really impossible to pencil out for development that would be potentially for ownership, and particularly because we can't do large condos. And when you build apartments, the idea that they're going to convert down the road is small, and even then it's going to take many years to get there. So there's a lot of middle housing options. I know I've talked to Jim quite a bit about how you could actually do some pretty high density development with middle housing that would be fee simple, potentially owner occupied. And so I think that's the point of this whole thing, is to track. And I think we are all in this together. I think if one jurisdiction is creating obstacles, that affects the market across the whole county to some degree, to some extent. And property values, just for raw land, are really, really high. And so what are the things that we're doing that might help bring those costs down? Because that ultimately is going to also bring down the broader cost of housing. And so I support this, and maybe there's some soft touch, language modifications that would improve it. But I generally speaking support this because I think home ownership is absolutely key, especially as we're going to do more dense housing and potentially impact, some quality of life issues. We want people to be able to build equity and be successful. And frankly, most small businesses are built from people borrowing against their residents. So I think we need to really, really double down on home ownership as a policy and an emphasis. But again, I think the intent is aspirational. How do we get there? And we've got to monitor it in order to know if those issues are happening. And so back to Dana's comments, I just thought, again, they were spot on, because if you start seeing lower numbers in one place than another, it at least exposes the opportunity to analyze the why, see if you can come up with some fixes. So I don't know if there's any hands online or anybody else has a comment. Go ahead.
So, is there any way to review the policy language in this, bring it to the cities, that, hey, what would you be comfortable with? What are you not comfortable in it? Gather a review. So again, just like the previous motion, table this, bring it back to the city, say, hey, where are you comfortable? Where are you not within the language? And then get our recommendations.
It's for subject, I think, to this body to decide, how this would be.
Yeah, well, bring a motion to table it, to push it back down to the jurisdictions and have a review done and look for formal discussion within bodies and get recommendations.
Okay.
Is there a timeline intended? Like with this, are you intending for this to come back at the July meeting or later, or?
We can do it at the July meeting, giving us a 30-day window to.
Okay. Is that, Kitty, is that your understanding of the intent of the motion? Okay, Commissioner Frank.
Is the intent to defer to the action? Because a deferral is different than a table. Then you table it, you've got to also have a vote to bring it off the table to take an action, where deferring just defers to the next meeting. So we're just looking for clarity in terms of what the intent was for the maker of the motion.
But we can defer it.
And
I'll amend my motion to defer it to the next meeting. Provide that opportunity of time.
do you accept that, Councilman? Okay, all right. So essentially a motion to defer with the caveat that this is being pushed to the jurisdictions for specific input that we would consider. Okay. Other thoughts, Commissioner?
Yeah, I would support that, because I think there's just a few minor, like I was just already brainstorming a few changes that could be made to, I think, accommodate the goals, because I think all of us are supporting the goal of we should all be doing this and working towards showing that we can have capacity in all of our communities for different income bands, and not just for rentals, but for homeownership. So I think we're all on the same page. It's just, when we have language that says you must and you are obligated, I do worry about legal consequences if the different jurisdictions aren't following that. So I think we could figure out some very easy language changes that would still get to the vision and the goals, and not put us in a box.
Okay. My request to the jurisdictions, assuming this motion passes, would be that, try to approach this assuming that it's going to be adopted, and what are the things that would improve it under that expectation. I just think that sort of input would be very helpful. So, other comments? Anybody online? Okay, seeing none. All in favor then of the motion to defer and give the jurisdictions an opportunity to weigh in, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, let's jump into our workshops. County and cities, EIS updates and impacts.
Busy meeting. Thank you all for your attendance and patience. Working with, we will, I think in the interest of everybody's patience and time, we'll combine these two because they're pretty much related anyway. And I'll leave open to any of our city planners to add something on their current EIS or comp plan processes as needed. The county issued its draft EIS a week or so ago. We had an extended part of getting an appendix out for transportation modeling, so we extended the comment period out to July 11th. We will be meeting with our planning commission on the 25th to talk through what we're calling the E part of the EIS, the actual environmental parts of that and how they relate to the various growth alternatives, so that we can try to correlate the work we've been doing on our critical areas ordinance and our comprehensive plan into the EIS as it's supposed to be used. We will also be bringing that for discussion with our Board of County Commissioners, tentatively planned on July 6th. That was before we extended the comment deadline, but we think that's still a good time where we'll have most of our comments in place and can give them a pretty good feel of what we're hearing from the communities and mostly the agencies. The intent on that meeting is to get guidance on at least what the alternatives or the parameters of a preferred alternative would look like, which if you remember the DEIS process is to create three alternatives. One was no action, one was essentially an infill growth, and one was a growth plus our historic patterns that would involve UGA modifications. Those are the bookends, and now with the board, we'll bring that down into what is the preferred approach to grow. How do you balance those things moving forward? So that's all going to be happening here in the next month or so. So I think that's fairly we're coming to the end of a long process, and the pieces are finally coming together. How that relates to the urban growth area is pretty direct. We have the DEIS now. We're going through that. We've sent it out for comment. We've begun to hear from agencies like DOT related to the polygons that were called study areas on the UGA map. Those will be continually refined now in more detail. You may recall in the original assessment, there were about 7 different criteria on the first cut of making that related to capital facilities, including water, sewer, transportation, related to adjacency to the existing UGA. And then finally, there was one on are they in the area of services and amenities that could be used by further growth? Those were very broad categories, and we're now narrowing those down in a more precise fashion. That will start to suggest, I hate to call it a ranking, but it's probably what it is, of the various UGA polygons down to those that have the highest evaluation for being able to be served by urban services at the most reasonable cost in the shortest period of time. And that's, in a sense, that's kind of the fundamental part of GMA is if you're going to grow beyond your boundaries, how do you justify that? And how does it make sure that we're meeting the rest of our criteria for a capital facilities plan, levels of service for parks and school districts, water districts, and sewer services. So that next round of urban growth area determinations will come after the comment period closes, and that will also come with guidance that we have from our meetings with our planning commission and our commissioners in early July. So as that wraps up, the next big elements for the county will be taking that information and then finalizing final draft, as always, the land use, transportation, and economic development chapters of our comp plan, which will be out for review in late July. Pulling all of this together for August, and then our goal of having the final draft in early September. We will be working on the final EIS as part of that, and then the final EIS will take direction from our planning commission's recommendation to the board, which won't happen until the first week in November. And so the sequencing is that the EIS is out. We're looking to agencies and the public for comments. We'll be gathering that with the planning commission, getting guidance from the board, completing the chapters on the comprehensive plan, and then the FEIS will study those in detail and be published. And now we're scheduling to publish it the day after the planning commission recommendation to the board in November. So happy to take any questions on our process, or happy to invite any of my colleagues up here to talk about their cities if they'd like.
Any comments from jurisdictions or PTAC have anything to contribute? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so if that is the case.
Give an update for City of Spokane Valley.
Sure, please.
I'll be very brief. City of Spokane Valley, we're preparing to issue our draft EIS first part of July. Around mid-July, we'll also have our full comp plan, draft comp plan put together for review. And so with that, we'll be looking for public comment, agency comments on both.
Great, thank you. Any others before I open the public comment? Okay, I've got one request for public comment, and that is Eric Lowe. So if there's anybody else, just bring a sheet up or raise your hand online.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yesterday, it was pretty late in the day. I sent my public comments, tried to get everyone. It might be filtering its way through to you, I'm not sure, but I'm the developer behind one of those polygons that is being considered. The Cougar Cliffs development in Lake Valley is 165 acres. about 17 acres within the city of Spokane, and the rest currently zoned urban reserve. I heard a lot of talk today, great discussion regarding home ownership. We have been, throughout this process, I've been working on this for 4 years now. Have tried to refine and sort of model our development on what the county has said that it wants to deliver home ownership for a range of income bands. We are looking at everything from condos to townhomes to garden courts to single family homes on slightly larger lots, but really trying to develop a neighborhood center for the Latah Valley, which has not really had one. And with that, I wanted to address some of in the draft EIS, there's a list of just sort of general comments that were asking about accessibility to US 195, whether or not it was possible to have a road to the west, things like that. And we have access to 195 already. It's an existing road. It's been there for decades. It's used by Avista to access power lines at the east end of our property, but we also have access via White Road, which connects to 195. And I think most importantly, our property is right in the path of a proposed frontage road that has been studied by SRTC that would try to provide connected access to Hatch. So we're trying to sort of preempt and get in front of a lot of these things to allow for development sort of hand in hand with WashDOT, with county, with the city of Spokane. I just really want to express how important for us it is to be partners with all of these jurisdictions as we develop, whether or not this happens now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We've owned this property for over 60 years, and we've seen the Latah Valley grow up around us, and we want to be good partners for everyone. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Elizabeth Wilson.
Hi, thank you again for taking your time and your guys' effort today. Again, and sorry for jumping the gun. I didn't realize that the EISs were going to be public comment available, or I wouldn't have started earlier. So in addition to Cheney, the full kind of wholesale abandonment of some of these rural traditional urban growth areas seems to me to have happened without as much involvement of the cities as it possibly should. In addition to Cheney's disconnect, there does seem to be some designation or indication in the EIS that the West Plains JPAs are going to be changing, inconsistent with what the Airway Heights has planned for its future land alternatives. Medical Lake also opting out of some of its rural traditional UGA JPAs and then adding back in rural and highly critical area land in alternative, which doesn't seem to really gel with the intent or the purpose of, planning where growth can actually occur in a way that is urban and doesn't challenge the critical area components. So I would encourage all of you and each of the cities to maybe check, but double check the work that's coming through on the DEIS for the JPAs and the changes to those to make sure there aren't unintended consequences or plans for taking property out that is in fact planned for development. The cities, I think, have a better beat on that than maybe the county does always. So that would be my request and suggestion. We'll get all of our comments in the ordinary course. And thank you all again for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else online?
No.
No? Anybody else around the table? Any comments? What's the timeline for folks to submit a written comment to the county?
July 11th.
July 11th. Okay.
Midday, July 11th.
Okay, so you got a couple weeks if you've got written comments. If there's no others, we don't have anything else on our agenda and we are at 11:47. Oh, we need to do the minutes. All right, can I get a motion to approve is it April and
March 18th.
March and April?
March approved the March 18th and March 29th, 2026 minutes.
Perfect. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? Okay, those carried. So with that, I will now adjourn this meeting and we'll see everybody back July 15th.
Do
Do what? Well, oh, I just got. Sit here.
That's okay.
That's the date.
Take care.
17.
Oh, this, before you go.
This one too, or?
Yes.
So you're good then.
One as we were happy.
I don't think you can discuss.
One of the first.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joel. See you later.
Yeah.
It's got.